Hello everybody, this is Himdad Abdulqahar Muhammad with you again in another lesson in the module Translation, Theory and Practice, and this will be lesson number 6, in which we are going to continue talking about problems of translation and problems that usually translators face during the process of translating. Previously, we have talked about several problems, and mostly they were linguistic problems, and in this lesson also we will continue talking about problems that are related to linguistic discrepancies between the source language and the target language. For today we will be talking about some new problems, examples, and then at the end we might suggest some solutions for these problems. One of the problems that usually translators face is the use of transliteration. Sometimes you come across a word or a term, an expression that is so common in the world that you don't have a choice. You have to use that as it is, even though you have some native word or expression for that. For example, a word like charisma, a word like seminar, a word like opposition, or something called Human Rights Watch. We have seen several cases when a text is translated into Kurdish, for instance. The word charisma is as it is. This is called transliteration. Seminar as it is. Opposition with a French pronunciation of the word opposition. And sometimes also in the news we hear Human Rights Watch. So as it is, transliteration. This sometimes creates problems not only for the translator himself, but sometimes for the reader. For example, an ordinary reader will not understand what is Human Rights Watch. If you have something in your own language or in the target language, so why you don't use it instead of that transliterated word? For a word like charisma, even though people will understand, but we have کەسێکی لێهاتوو, کەسێکی سەرنجڕاکێش. For example, a word like seminar, even though it is very common, but we have a very good and common native word which is kor, even though some people might think that they are different, but it will give and convey the same idea. Opposition or opposition is also taken from French, but we have a very good compound word, djabara, or whatever other combination we can use. And for Human Rights Watch, we can use Rwangay Mafi Mrov, which is totally native and very natural and Kurdish. So the problem of transliteration is a case that we need to be aware of. Sometimes also translators face what is called a common mistake. So we have to avoid that in one way or another. For example, a word like paper in English. It has several meanings, but one of the meanings is توێژینەوە and the other meaning is par. So we have to be aware of this one. Even though I personally do not consider this as a mistake, because paper is a multi-meaning word or a polysemous word that has more than one meaning. But look at the word candid camera. Candid camera is candid, it means frank, or it means real or truthful. But nowadays in our culture it has been turned into کامێرەی شاراوە. In reality this is a common mistake that people do, so try to find another way in order to express that, or in order to convey the meaning, the true meaning of the word. In English culture it is called candid camera, so کامێرەی ڕاستیەکانی and کامێرەی ڕاشکاو, not کامێرەی شاراوە is better. And the word literature also is a kind of multi-meaning word. Sometimes it refers to adab yan wێژە, or it means توێژینەوەی پێشوو yan کارەکانی پێشوو لە بوارێکی دیاریکراو. So sometimes translators also make mistakes in the translation because of common mistakes. For example, if you have a Kurdish text and you want to translate that into English, and that Kurdish text contains a word like kamerای شاراوە. How do you translate that into English if you don't know the original word, which is candid camera, not hidden camera? The other linguistic problem that usually translators face is there are words that have no correspondent or equivalent in the target language. Every language has its own words that are sometimes impossible to translate into some other languages. And when one language has a specific word to describe a situation, finding an alternative expression in another language becomes a challenge to translators. For example, this takes us to cultural differences, but we will talk about cultural differences in another separate video. But let's give some examples of the words that cannot be translated either from English into Kurdish or from Kurdish into English. For example, there is something called baptism. In English it is found, but there is no one word equivalent or corresponding word in Kurdish language for that word. So this is a problem. In this case, you are obliged to explain what does that mean. And if you, for example, talk about a Kurdish example, for example, we have something called نوێژە بارانە, where there is no rain and people will pray to God in order to start raining or ask for raining. But this is not found in the English culture. Another example about words that have no correspondent in the target language is usually in Asian languages. For example, they have many words to describe feelings, deep feelings, affection, love and respect, and sensations that are very hard to translate into other languages using a single word. Let's take some Kurdish examples, even though they might seem local, colloquial, or in some cases funny, but they are found. What if you were asked to translate a text or to translate a stretch of language, a speech that contains one of these words? How are you going to translate that? For example, in Hawler dialect, usually they say lot namaima. I mean, how can you translate that? Because it shows a kind of feeling that is not expressed in the same way in English culture. بحيراني بم, بساقط بم, and دوري سرد قريم. These are several examples that describe feelings, sensations, affection, and even sometimes showing endearment and respect. In other languages like Japanese, for example, they have a special word to express the relaxation you get after you bathe in the forest. For example, shirinin yuku is the term used in Japanese, but we cannot translate that into other languages because this is not found in the other cultures. It is usually related to the Japanese culture. And in Chinese also we have yuan bei, which means a sense of complete accomplishment. So in source language, it is very important when you come across words that have no correspondent in the target language, you have to not force yourself by expressing it in one word. You have to explain it. What does that mean? And that's very normal in translation. We talked about words that have no correspondent. But on the other hand, we have words that have multi-meanings, or they are polysemous. They have more than one meaning. What should translators do in this case? They have to resort to the context. By context, we mean situational context, where it is said, who said it, and to whom it was said, and when it was said. And even linguistic context is important. What are the surrounding words of that one? What precedes and what follows is very important. Let's take some examples. For instance, the word arm, A-R-M, it has at least two meanings. Either of the two upper limbs of the human body, from the shoulder to the hand. In Kurdish we call it qol or bal. Or it could mean also a branch of division of a country's military forces or the army. So you say Bali Sarbazi or Bali Taibat La Spa. Another multi-meaning word is the word bank. Bank, again, it could mean a land sloping up along each side of a river or a canal, or a ground near a river or seashore, we call it. Kanar, yan qaragh. Another common meaning of the word bank is the establishment for keeping money and valuables, jewelry, safely, and the money being paid out of the customer's order by means of checks, for example. Banki para. And another word that has more than one meaning is magazine. Magazine is a usually paper-covered periodical. Usually it is weekly or monthly or sometimes even quarterly. Govar we call it. Or it has another meaning, a chamber where it holds the cartridges of a rifle or pistol before they are fed into the breech. So مخزنی چک سلاح يعني فيشة كالجر is called magazine. Let's take some other examples of one word, very common word, R-U-N, run, and see how many different meanings it could have depending on the context, depending on the place of the sentence, depending on the words that precede and follow that one. Just have a look at these different meanings. The athlete is running. Her nose is running. For how long is the movie running? Who left the water running? Mr. Kelly is running for president. Does your car run? His sermons seem to run on forever. I have a run in my stocking. If you look at the word, the meaning of the word run or running in these examples, you see how difficult translation could get, especially when you come across a word or an expression that has more than one meaning. So in this case, you have to resort to the context. You don't need to do it very quickly. You have to think about the context and in order to find the appropriate meaning. In the first one, the athlete is running is the common meaning of the word, دەکات. ورزشوانەکە دەکات. Her nose is running. Running here means دێتە خوارێ or هەڵامەت or pursue. For how long is the movie running? Running here is for how long will it last or how long has it been working. چەند دەخایەنێ یان چەندە دەستی پێکردووە فیلمەکە. Who left the water running? چێ ئاوەکەی بە کراوەی بەجێهێشتووە. Mr. Kelly is running for president. خۆی دەپاڵێوێ بۆ هەڵبژاردن بۆ نمونە. Does your car run? ئایا سیارەکەت کار دەکات? And his sermons seem to run on forever. Here run it means درێژە دەکێشێ یان بەردەوام دەبێ. I have a run in my stocking. Here run has a special meaning. Run here means هەڵوەشانەوە. هەڵوەشانەوەی درومان یان جلوبەرگ. So this shows how difficult and how challenging a multi-meaning word could get while you are translating. So translators must resort to the context in order to find the appropriate meaning of that word in that particular context. Another very common problem that translators face is dealing with phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are tough challenges in translation, especially when translating from English into a language or languages that do not use similar constructions. Phrasal verbs are usually composed of a verb and a preposition or an adverb or both of them, and this makes it difficult for translators to recognize it at first glance. And the difficulty comes usually from the fact that the phrasal verbs get an entirely different meaning after you add the preposition or adverb than the meaning of the head word alone. Think about the word to run or versus run away or run into. These three examples. It may be easy for you to notice the difference, but for someone who does not speak English every day or who is not knowledgeable in the language, it can be a real challenge to get the right meaning of each of these three verbs. Run alone, it means راکردن. Run away, it means هەڵاتن. Run into, it means بەڕێکەوت تووشی بوو یان بەڕێکەوت چاوی پێکەوت. Another very common verb is go. Go alone, it means bro. Go away, it means وازبێنە or دوورکەوە. Go off, it means تەقینەوە یان دەتەقێتەوە. You see, the meaning undergoes a total and entire change than the word alone. This is what makes phrasal verbs very challenging for translators. Another good example, maybe the verb put is very common also. When a phrasal verb has more than one explanation, like put down, in this case the translator needs to resort to context in order to understand what does that mean or what is the intended meaning. For example, put down means کۆتایی پێدێنێ, to bring to an end. The police tried to put down a riot. But again, put down in another context, the same put down may mean something different, may mean criticize. He was put down for the way he dressed. Or put down roots when you add another thing. For example, it means to establish a permanent residence. Ragi da kutawa. So dealing with phrasal verbs is very problematic and very challenging, and the most important thing is to resort to good, authentic, authoritative dictionaries in order to get the real meaning of it, and in addition to dictionaries, the context will also help. So what solutions do we suggest when we come across such problems as common mistakes, transliteration, and words that have no equivalent, or words that have more than one meaning, or phrasal verbs? The first important solution is context. And by context we mean situational context. By situational context we mean who said it, to whom it was said, and then where was it said, at what time, because this will clarify the intended meaning. And the other thing is linguistic context. What other words are used, are surrounding the one intended word to be translated, because they will clarify each other. And the other solution that we suggest is also we have to focus on conveying the meaning in the easiest way possible, not to use a word that is not understood, not to use or to even coin one of your words that is not very common, that's not very natural, just because it is equivalent to that word or you think it might be equivalent. So your focus should be on conveying the meaning in the easiest way possible. When it comes to phrasal verbs or multi-meaning words, just like idioms, they are just like idioms because the meaning is changed when you add a preposition or an adverb to that one. So we have a choice to make. First, we have to search for an equivalent in the target language. If we could find an equivalent, then this is good. Then, if not, we go to the second step, which is finding a near expression to that one. If not, then we have to resort to explanation. You have to explain what does that mean, and no matter how long it takes, but you have to convey the meaning in the easiest way and in the safest way possible in order not to be away or not to divert from the general meaning of the intended text to be translated. Thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for other videos.